tremendous honor and pleasure. I've been looking forward to this all day, knowing that we would be meeting this evening. And I must say that it's so nice for me to watch all of you speaking to each other and seeing each other and delighting and discussing with each other. It's a very community feel, and it's wonderful to be able to see, and I'm honored to be able to take part with you tonight. So as Rabbi Elituv mentioned, and he requested that I would speak a bit on the time. Thursday, we'll begin what we call the 3 weeks. And the reason we call it the 3 weeks is because there are 3 weeks between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. And we actually call that time Ben HaMetzarim, which literally means between the straits. It is a time of distress. It is a time of sadness. It is a time a bit of mourning. And so I regret that this particular talk will not be one that is speaking of celebration and joy, although I do believe, and I am hoping that I will leave you with ideas to help all of us grow and to develop and to enhance our lives, because even these times, the times that are the sadder of times, the times which require us to introspect and to question what went wrong and what might still be wrong, are important questions for us to ask, even if uncomfortable questions for us to ask. And I do think that is a very beautiful part of our Torah, and a beautiful part of our religious life in Judaism. Judaism looks at every aspect of the human condition, including the difficult aspects, including the aspects that require us to look at things that are uncomfortable for us to look at, think about things that are uncomfortable for us to think, all in order for us to be able to grow and be greater, more robust, and whole, integrated in ourselves as we go through life in this world, because that at the end of the day is all ultimately that we can do. We cannot change other people, can't control all of our situations, but we can definitely work on the development of our own selves, which is the most sacred and important work that any of us can do. So tonight, with your permission, I would like to share with you an idea that Rabbi Elituv titled tonight, looking at things that we can heal and improve. So I think always there are these things, but we're going to look at it from a place that was a darker period or a darker moment in our people's history. And not only is it a darker period or moment, it's one that recurs. It's one that seems to keep coming up for us. And when we find patterns and things that seem to keep coming up for us, it's important for us to kind of focus on them and recognize what's at the heart of it, what is at the roots of it, that I might be able to take away each year in my relationship to it and my growth. So we're going to start with one of my favorites. We're going to start with Maimonides. We're going to start with the Rambam. And the Rambam writes about these fast days. There are fast days that we have in our calendar that we not only commemorate, but we actually engage in to address issues that had we had problems with in our history, that seem to be still an element of issue or problematic in our lives. Although these problems in our lives that kind of continue on are very much part of the human condition, which is why they're there. They sit with us. And so each and every single year, what we try to do is to be able to address it anew, perhaps on a different plane, on a different level, and a different place and experience in our life. So here is what Maimonides writes about these fasts. He says, Yesh Sham Yamim. He writes this for anyone who would like to reference it in the 5th chapter of Hilchot Ta'anit, Halacha Aleph, the first halacha. He says, Yesh Sham Yamim. There are days, Shekol Yisrael mit'anim bahem, that all of Israel fasts on these days. And the reason they do so, he says, Mipnei hatzarot shira'u bahem. It's because of the hardships and calamities that occurred on these days. Why do we fast, says Maimonides? Well, mainly to awaken our hearts. Well, how does fasting awaken our hearts? And the basic reason for fasting and its connection to awakening our hearts is that, food is a very important thing to us. So important that if we're not having lunch, we're wondering why. There's no real situation in our day that if we're not having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if we're being kept from having our regular meals and things to eat, it's definitely something that calls our attention. So, for example, the Hachamim will not necessarily have us fast, but they will have us not eat whenever they want us to remember something, right? The rabbis, whenever they want us to remember to do something, they say, don't eat. So they want us to remember say Kiddush, they say, don't eat before you say Kiddush. They want us to remember to light Hanukkah candles, don't eat before you light Hanukkah candles. They want you to remember to count the Omer, don't eat before you count the Omer. Yeah, all of that is in order to go. Well, if I tell you not to eat, then you're going to be wondering why you're not eating. And then you're going to realize, oh, I have to count the Omer, I have to light Hanukkah candles, and I have to say Kiddush. Yeah, so the Hachamim use our basic sustenance, our basic food drive in order to be able to keep us at attention. So Rambam is saying that the fasting does the same, although the fasting is a little bit more severe because it's asking us not to eat for an entire day. And what that essentially means is that not only do we recognize that we have something to pay attention to, we also recognize our weakness. Because once you've had a good lunch, you feel like you can conquer the world. Who are we kidding? I mean, if you've eaten well, you feel like you are the master in power. You have all the ability to be able to do whatever it is that you need. You miss a meal and suddenly, it's a very, very different experience. And so the Hachamim wanted us also to be able to be, when I say the Hachamim, this is going back very far. This is going back all the way to the days of the prophets. And these fasts are actually recorded in the words of the prophets. And they are concerned that, not only should we just pay attention, but we should sense our own weakness. We should sense our own fragility and our own humanity. The fact that we are not entirely in charge and in control. And that will very much be the theme here that I share with you. So we'll come back. So the Rambam says it's to awaken the hearts. He says, and to open the pathways of return to God, return to our true selves, return to truth and what is real in this life. And then he says something fascinating. Listen, that would have been enough. Yeah, he says, and doing so, fasting, yezikaron lema'aseinu harayim. It will be a memory. It will be something that calls our attention to our poor deeds. And ma'aseh avotenu, shehaya k'ma'asenu ata. And it will cause us to be conscious of the acts of our forefathers that are just like our deeds today. Now, I think, this is just me, but the fact that the Rambam puts that in there is fascinating, staggering, really. Because what he's saying, he's not just saying, listen, you and I, we have to fast because we have to remember the bad things that we've done. He's saying something much more profound than that, much more serious than that. He's saying it reminds us of our own deeds that are just like the deeds of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. Well, that's a serious thing to say because essentially what that's saying is nothing's changed. It's saying that we haven't made much progress in terms of these particular behaviors and traits. For some reason, these issues stay with us generation after generation after generation. Now, before I go on to the particular issue, I want to pause here on this, the generational aspect. It's not something that we always think about, but the reality is that when there are elements in our families, in our communities, in our world that are not serving us in the most healthy way, or that cause us a lack of health. And when I say health, I don't only mean physical health, I mean mental health, I mean emotional health, I mean spiritual health. All of those components of self run either in health or in a pathological way, right? Some problem. Those elements run through generations until we address them and heal them. It is more so that those things occur on spiritual, psychological, and emotional levels from generation to generation than the physical ones, although of course we all know that the physical ones do as well. So when you go to see the doctor, they will very often ask you, what is your history medically? What is your family history medically? What is your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents? Did they have any issues that I should know? Well, why should you know about that when I'm coming to? It's me, it's not them. No, but we have to look because these things pass down. It's part of what it means to be part of a family and to come from a chain of human beings that come before us. We are not spontaneously generated. We are not islands. What we grapple with and what we deal with in our lives did not begin with us. And that is the first issue here that Rambam is making. So when we fast, we can fast in one of two ways. When we come to the day, we can do it in one of two ways. We can do it as rote. This is just what we do. And I can't wait till dinner. And, just a matter of looking at the watch, especially during summer. Summertime, it gets to be really late, especially here. We can do that. Or what we can do is say, well, I'm supposed to be thinking about something today. I'm supposed to actually be looking at something today. And it's interesting because usually, when that happens in our life, something happens in our life, somebody prompts us. This is a national day of introspection, which is phenomenal when you think about it. I mean, what it means to have a religion that prompts us to look in generationally to what it is that might be coming into my life handed down to me from my parents, great-grandparents, ancestors. It is profoundly focused on our rehabilitation and our achievement of our greatest human expression. It may take generations to heal, and that's fine. As we know in our lives, things take time. It's one of the reasons why we have these things come around every single year. And that's a very difficult thing for us to deal with as well. Just as difficult as it is for us to look at the things that are causing us problems, it's difficult for us not to be able to solve the things that are causing us problems right away. It's fascinating, but it's true. Even when we identify that particular things might cause us difficulty, challenge, might be affecting our spiritual health and well-being, our psychological health and well-being, when we are aware of it, we want to fix it right away. And more often than not, what such fixes require are steady, consistent, continued commitment, growth, and work. One cannot whip a rose to come out and be a rose when it is just at the beginning of its budding. It takes time for a being to be whole, full, and complete. So all of that I just mentioned to you is in these lines of the Rambam. Of course, he doesn't write it out explicitly, but it's without question involved in what it is that he's saying. And so he writes frugally with a great deal of richness, right, impacted or put in to his words. So what we have is a situation of generational development, in where I recognize and I need to take a day to be able to look at this particular issue, which I'm going to share with you, don't worry, and recognize how it is that it manifests in my life as a member of this people, and what I might be able to do this year to be able to address it. And it may just be that this year it's just being aware of it. Maybe it's this year just being aware of part of it, of a layer of it, and holding that and recognizing it. And if I can do something about it, what can I do? And seeing if indeed I might be able to do something to be able to put myself on a path of healing. And if I am able to put myself on a path of healing and achieve a level of healing to whatever degree, it is that much less of issue and that much more of healing that I give to my children and the next generation. So a very serious thing, very, very important. So the Rambam says that's why we fast. We remember the acts of ours and the acts of our fathers that are precisely as ours are today. And we refrain from eating in order to be able to recognize our frailty in our human condition and to keep our minds on the consciousness of these days. So the day that is coming up for us on Thursday is the 17th of Tammuz. And being that we are supposed to look backwards to be able to figure out what happened but not backwards to be able to figure out what to do about it, because looking backwards is not going to help us. Looking backwards is only going to show us what the problem is, not the solution. The solution can't be back there. It's got to be over there in the front. Otherwise, we should just go back to what it was that they were doing. So what we do is we look back. And when we look back, we try to look the furthest back. We try to look as far back as we can to the root of the problem. We do not, this is important, we do not want to look primarily at symptoms. Primarily what we want to look at is the cause of whatever reverberations of that cause may be symptomatic in the nation. So, what most people know about Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and what most people speak about regarding Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is a symptomatic issue, not a core cause. And what is the symptomatic issue that most people speak about? They speak about in relationship to Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash, to Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. And what occurs on the 17th of Tammuz in the Second Temple period is the walls of Jerusalem are breached by the enemy. So the fortification of the city is broken, and there is an invasion of the enemy from the outside in to the city, which by 3 weeks' time massacres the city and ends up on the 9th of Ab, 3 weeks later, destroying the Holy Temple. So it's a very, very difficult period, very, very, very somber and mournful period, a period of tragedy. But what I am saying to you is that that episode of breaching of the walls of Jerusalem and destruction of the Beit HaMikdash are not the core of the problem. Those are symptoms of a much earlier problem. And tonight what we're going to look at is specifically the 17th of Tammuz. And what we know occurred on the 17th of Tammuz, that is our tradition handed out over to us again from generation to generation. It's not the first, the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem is not the first thing that happened on that day. The first thing that happened on that day is Moses came down from Mount Sinai after going up to receive the 10 Commandments and the opening of the Torah, and came down to a golden calf. And he sees the golden calf, and he shatters the tablets that he's holding as he comes down the mountain. That occurs, shattering of those tablets and the golden calf occur on the 17th of Tammuz. So there, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, is the core of the issue. And to understand Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and the reason why we fast and why that manifested 1,000 years later in the breaching of the walls of Yerushalayim is what we need to kind of begin to understand, which is what I'd like to be able to share with you here, this discussion. So let's take a look at it. What happens? Well, here's the scene. Moses, this is a nation of slaves, right? We've got a whole bunch of people that have just come out of Egypt. They haven't even been, a few days out of Egypt. They come to Mount Sinai. Moses is their connection with God. They don't know any God. They have tradition, of course, from Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. Their parents tell them about this God. Remember, these are people that for over 200 years are enslaved. So remember what I said about the generational things, right? Generation after generation after generation of slave mentality in a nation of complete idol worship, right? Egypt is a nation of complete idol worship. So you have a people that now are liberated from this condition of over 2 centuries of being in that situation. And Moses is their savior, right? I mean, Moses is the man that everybody looks to be able to find the guidance from. They can't see this God, feel this God, hear this God. I mean, and Moses is telling them, God's taking you out of Egypt. God, God, God. And it's wonderful. And even God, has a little bit of sympathy for this situation. So he's got pillar of cloud and fire, is manifesting in some physicality, although it's not him, it's just a representation. And he's leading them through the desert in some form. And then what ends up happening is Moses says, after the whole fire, fire, thunder, and lightning show on Mount Sinai, he says, so listen, kids, I'm going away for 40 days and 40 nights. Take care. I'll be back. Behave yourselves. And Moses goes up the mountain 40 days and 40 nights and leaves him. And you know what? The amazing thing is, for the most part, they behave themselves. They behave themselves for 39 and a half days. And what ends up happening is by the 40th day, they're getting a little bit antsy. And they are concerned that because Moses has not come down at 12:01 a.m. on day 40, that he's dilly-dallying. I'm not even sure if he's ever going to come out or if he's going to come down from that mountain. The Pasuk actually says, Ze Moshe ha'ish lo yadanu me hayalo, which means this man Moses, we have no idea what happened to him. He probably went up to the mountain and died up there with God or something. But there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to go through this on our own. So that's the situation. And to show you that the origins of the situation are indeed quite innocent. If you're going to do something that's mischievous, or you're going to do something that's, what shall we call it, subversive, you don't usually go to the people in leadership to help you. You usually do it. You don't go to the head teacher, and say, listen, we've got a great plan here. We're going to do a golden calf. Can you help us out? Usually what you do is you get a little bit of your troublemaker friends together and you plan this thing without the knowledge of the head teacher and you go on and do it. But to show that it was not mischievous in its origins, who do they go to in order to be able to help them with this entire project of setting up a stand-in, physical stand-in for God's presence among the people? Moses was that presence. Moses goes up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, does not come down in what they believe to be a timely manner. Therefore, it's very likely that Moses is dead. And they panic. And I'm going to talk about that panic in a second, but in their panic, they go to Aaron. They go to Moses' brother. And they say to him, Aaron, make us a god. Now, they're not saying make us an idol that we can worship. What they're saying is, make us something that we can see, that we can feel, that we can hold, that will represent the God that took us out of Egypt. And guess what Aaron says? Sure. Now, there's a lot of dialogue on this in the rabbinic literature, right? What on earth was Aaron thinking? And indeed, Moshe comes down and he says, you should know, God was really not pleased with Aaron. And he almost wiped him out until I interceded. Aaron was a dead man. Just so that you should know, Moses is saying, right? God was very upset with Aaron. I interceded and I saved him. And Aaron agrees with the people, but his intentions were also noble. He felt, listen, these are a bunch of slaves. So we're going to have to be able to help them over here. Give them something to delay, something to stall them, so that they don't run into a frenzy of pandemonium, which in the end did indeed happen regardless, right? But this is what Aaron's thinking is. So he gathers all of the gold and they throw the gold into the fire. The midrash is that this calf comes out. And indeed, the Pasuk actually says it that way. It says, this golden calf came out of the fire somehow. We ended up setting this up. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, is not the problem. None of this is a problem yet. The problem is as things carry on. And this is one of the reasons why we are terribly hesitant to do anything like this in our service and our behavior, because we are easily triggered. So what happens is the people get up the next morning and they start to party and play around because there's nobody there to be able to really regulate this. And once you start a party and you have a mob mentality, good luck in trying to get one person to break it up. To the point that as far as the Hachamim are concerned, the Midrash is concerned, people died trying to break it up in this event. So what happens is they build this calf, that was golden calf, and they start dancing around it. And how do they dance around it, right? They join hands and they do the hora around this golden calf, holding hands around the calf. And that in the pasuk is called mecholot. Mecholot are circles, right? They do circuits around the calf. The fascinating thing is, listen to this. Moses comes down the mountain and he sees what is going on. And he shatters the tablets, not when he sees the golden calf, but when he sees the ring of dancing around it. You hear that? It says, Vayar ve'et hamecholot. He saw not only the golden calf, he saw the ring of dancing around it. That was it. That is what caused Moshe to shatter the luchot, the what you call it? You know what I'm talking about. So what happened? Why is that what gets Moshe? The answer, I believe, is this, is what I'm suggesting. And we'll connect it back to the Beit HaMikdash. All of us in our lives deal with uncertainty, right? I mean, the reality is that none of us really know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. None of us saw this coming, let's be honest. None of us saw COVID-19 coming. I mean, maybe Bill Gates did, but none of us did, right? We were just living our life. We didn't anticipate that any of this craziness was going to happen. Nobody knows what tomorrow, next week, next year is going to bring. We do, our 5-year strategic plans only to make ourselves feel better and give us a sense of vision. But the reality is, who knows what's happening in 1 year from now, much less 5 years from now. That's the reality. And yet we carry on doing this. And of course, the old adage, man plans and God laughs and all of that business. We deal with uncertainty as part of the human condition and the nature of living in this world, because it's a chaotic world. It's a world that we just do not know what it is that's going on. As a mechanism, a human mechanism, for dealing with that, we are saddled with an ancient mechanism. An ancient mechanism is early human history, right? I'm talking hunter-gatherer times, yeah? When the most important thing for us to do was to get food. We didn't really have time for anything else, okay? I'm talking about go way back to early human history. I'm talking about before art, before the museums and stuff like that, before going to theater, which we won't be doing for some time. Before that, the only reason we're able to do any of that stuff in the arts, everything everybody's talking about, should we be funding the arts now? Well, the arts are collapsing. There's an entire market that's collapsing. And yes, it is important for us to be able to manage and take care of those things and think about how it is that we're going to save those things. But think about the fact that the only reason we have any room to do those things is because our food is at the supermarket. Right? I mean, the only reason that we have any ability to do those things is because I can buy my clothes in a store. I don't have to go and shear the sheep to get my coat. I don't have to go and grind the beans to have my coffee. I might want to if I'm posh, yeah, but then I get this nice little machine that, good luck in making that machine, right? You buy the machine, and then you go and buy the beans from somebody who actually went and had to get wherever they got them from, cultivated from whatever forest that they got them from, wherever it is they got them from. You understand what I'm saying? We have streamlined life. But in the old days, it is not the way that we did things. Nobody had any time for coffee. Nobody had any time for anything that was leisurely, unless you were already at the end of the day, it was dark outside, the bison were out, you had killed or not killed whatever it is that you could for dinner, and you sit around the campfire telling stories until people fall asleep. That was it. Nobody had any time to think about philosophy. You following me? So, that being the case, the uncertainty of life was very acute. The uncertainty of life is, if you did not know that that was a lion or not, it was too late. So whatever mechanisms we have to deal with doubt and uncertainty are survival mechanisms that are geared, listen please carefully to this point, that are geared towards safety and survival, not truth. Our survival mechanisms that deal with uncertainty are geared and wired towards survival for the moment, not truth. Which means that when I, as a human being, initially interpret uncertain circumstances, which I always feel I need to do, because if I experience a circumstance that is uncertain and I have no idea what's going on, the first thing that I want to do is have an idea of what's going on. Isn't that true? I'll give you an example of this. I'll give you a phenomenal example of this. You may have even heard me say this example before, because I give it all the time because it's such a powerful example. I'm sure that at some point in your lives, you will have dreamed a dream that incorporates outside noise that is going on while you're sleeping. Right? You're sleeping, maybe the alarm goes off, maybe there's a car that's, beeping, outside, hooting, maybe there's, some kind of strange noise that's going on, and you're still asleep, but you incorporate that sound or that situation into your dream. So the car honking outside becomes trumpets at the parade in your dream. You know what I'm talking about? Can I get some nodding of heads over here if you know what I'm talking about? Is everybody sleeping? Thank you, thank you. You don't have to just nod your head just to nod your head. If you know what I'm talking about, then you can nod your head. What is that? Why does that happen? Just think about that, right? Your brain is busy telling you a story, which tells you something about how we love stories, because, the body goes to sleep and the mind stays up telling us stories all night, So your mind is telling you a story, as it normally does in its dream state. And then suddenly there is an unaccounted for detail. What does your mind do immediately with that unaccounted for detail, unexplained? It provides an elaborate explanation for it instantly. And it incorporates it into the dream. If you ever doubt that we rationalize situations that we do not understand, nor do we have answers for, just think about that phenomenon. Our brains are wired to bring us comfort and survival rather than truth. Truth is much more difficult. What will happen often is it will become so strange to your brain that it will wake up, right? And realize, okay, this is a little bit too crazy. I've got to figure out what's going on over here. But what that means is that in order for me to be able to know what is actually happening, I need to test what is happening against reality and sense whether what I am interpreting, what I believe is going on, is that indeed what is going on. Now, why am I going through all of this? It sounds like perhaps a tangent, but I guarantee you that this is not a tangent. This is to indicate to all of us the intense need that we have to explain things and find security in uncertain circumstances. Yes? Imagine the circumstance. Moses, gone, 40 days and 40 nights. They are in the middle of the desert, the middle of nowhere, right? No longer in Egypt, no security, even though they were slaves there. They had security of knowing what it meant to be a slave. Nobody questioned what their lives meant over there. They are completely fish out of water, thrown into the desert. No Moses, no sign of God, no anything. One could forgive them for trying to project onto this reality some manner of control of the situation. So the way that they control the situation is not, we're taking over here, forget Aaron. And what they say is, look, obviously we have a God situation going on. God has taken us out of Egypt. We're not going to pretend he didn't. We have a situation where God is supposed to be in our midst. What we need to be able to help our uncertainty is to create some kind of fixed image that we can hold on to. All of that could be forgiven and understood. The thing is, when it moves from being a stimulus, a holder, a placeholder for something else, and becomes significant in and of himself to the point that I dance around it. And this is important. I don't just dance around it. I dance around it in a way that makes any external entrees, right? Any external involvement in my world that I've created, out. Keeps it all out. That's what the closed circuit is. Right? The closed circuit is, not only have I created my God, not only do I have control of this situation, I am enclosing this creation of mine so that it should be impervious to any external stimuli, any external information, anything that wakes me up from my dream. And here is the source of the 17th of Tammuz. To what degree do we need to control our reality, our lives, and the uncertainty of our time in order for me to be able to feel that I can survive? And the only reason that that is problematic is this: we are not big enough to control such things. We don't have what it takes to control those realities in our world. I'm not big enough to do it. You're not big enough to do it. No one is big enough to control life. That is what God is for. And that is why we have him. And the whole of life can be brought into one simple truth. Learning the difference between what I can change and control and what I can't. And knowing the difference. And that's Shiur Tammuz. When Moshe comes down the mountain and sees the golden calf, that's not the problem. So when Moshe comes down and sees the golden calf and the enclosure around it, the dancing around it, the bowing to it, the insistence that it should not go away, that what I have projected, what I have created to make me feel safe and in control must be protected at all costs, even at the cost of truth and reality. And what Moses does is shatter that. That's why he shatters them, because it's not, who else, they almost killed the guy that tried to stop it. So Moshe comes down the mountain, sees what's going on, and he shatters the luchot to be able to break them out of the trance. All of a sudden, I remember this kind of experience because, you know, there were situations, I shared a room with two brothers growing up. So it was the three of us in the room. And when you share a room with two brothers, you know, there's three of you in the room, all kind of antics, you know, happen at night before you actually fall asleep. And things can get a little rowdy, you know, and a little noisy, and you get all caught up in your fun and games and playing and laughing and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden you look up and your father's standing in the doorway of your bedroom. Suddenly it does not seem as fun as it did when you started all of the fun and games. Everything all of a sudden crumbles down to the ground, and you realize that maybe shouldn't have been doing that. Crazy. Yeah. That was Moshe coming down the mountain. But what Shiur Tammuz brings to us is, what in my life am I controlling, manipulating, holding as if I were the God? And that's indeed an uncomfortable question to answer. But it's an uncomfortable day, isn't it? That's why we fast on that day and we're not dancing on that day. We fast on the day to be able to think, where in my life am I controlling my relationships, the people around me? Am I manipulating the people around me? Am I manipulating my children, my loved ones? Am I controlling the environments around me and the circumstances and situations around me? Trying to? Do I find that it's working to control other people? Is that working for me? To what degree do we need to dance around the situations that we need to have a certain way in order for us to be able to feel secure? To what degree are we playing God? And in which situations do we not realize that we are not big enough? And that in everything that we do, which is the truth, which is what the Torah teaches us ultimately, that in everything that we do it with God. Because He's driving, not me. Now, it may sound like I say this from some kind of authoritarian perspective. Please do not be fooled by that. I suffer from this like many other people do. I only share it with you to help my ears hear it. And I go through it every year in order for me to be able to try and learn it one bit better. Because I can tell you, and I'll be quite honest and open with you, I am every day defeated when I realize another thing I have tried to control rather than give to God. And the development of my time and the development of my days and the development of myself is really just a question of understanding. What are you still holding, Joe, that you just can't hold? What are you still trying to control, Joe, that really is not yours to control? Which golden calf are you holding on to for dear life, lest some outside information of truth bring you into some disillusionment, as if disillusionment is a problem, right? That's so strange, right? Disillusionment is a bad word for us, but think about what it means. It's taking you out of an illusion. That is the thinking of the 17th of Tammuz. And you know what? The shattering of the luchot that Moshe did was, according to the Hachamim, his own choice. God didn't tell him to shatter those tablets. He did it of his own volition. And do you know what the amazing thing is traditionally, in terms of our tradition? It is one of the greatest acts he ever did in his entire life. As a matter of fact, the Torah ends with the words, Kol hayad hazakah, all the great strength in arms that Moshe accomplished in his life, the last line of the Torah. And Rashi on that pasuk says, Yad hazakah, the strong arm of Moshe, is the breaking of the luchot. Because he essentially woke us up and said, no, we're not going to be doing things like that. I mean, I understand, you're slaves and this freedom thing is not easy for you, and I left you for 40 days and 40 nights. Yes, I understand that was an extremely difficult situation. Really, I do understand. It was a very bad situation. And as a matter of fact, the Talmud says that Moshe, when he was actually up on the mountain, said, God, what are you doing? I mean, how do you take me away for 40 days and 40 nights? What do you expect them to do? That was part of his plea. No, I get it. But, Moshe says to them, but we're not going to be doing this anymore. We are not going to fall into our own projections and control in order to deal with the uncomfortable and uncertain circumstances of our lives. We are going to lean into the discomfort and choose truth over security. Now, I reiterate, that is the standard of the people of Israel. And we are the way we are as a people, very much because of that standard. So you look at the Jewish state and you realize that it is barely a human life in existence, 70 years. And its accomplishments are staggering. Do not underestimate what it means to have Moses shatter tablets at the very beginning of your history and say, we're not going to be doing things like that. We are not going to live a life in where we choose security over truth. Do you realize that in the ancient world, how radical that was? And so for us in our lives, we aim to hold that standard in our life, even if right now I am still budding as a rose. And it may take me many days, and for us in our lives, many years, to be able to develop to a point in where I don't need the golden calf anymore. I certainly don't need to dance around it. If we practice every day asking ourselves, what do I have the power to change in my life? And what do I not? And where do I learn that difference? Do I ask God to help me come to the awareness of that difference? To know what is in my, and I think that an important part of this is the difference between responsibility and control. It's very, very rare that we ever have control of anything. There is responsibility, which simply means I have an ability to respond to certain things. Control is God's, not mine. And so I ask myself, what is my responsibility, and where my responsibility ends? And sometimes it's not so clear. Sometimes I really do have to work on understanding what my responsibility is. But when my responsibility ends, do I give it to God? Is my relationship with God one in which I can give it to Him? And if it isn't, what's missing? Have I fashioned my own God? Have I come to try and know Him? All of that are part of what it is that we work on the 17th of Tammuz. And we come to an awareness, little by little in our lives, more and more in our lives, as to what it is that we can and cannot control, and what it is we can and cannot change. And we become humble as we grow in those awarenesses. The more I'm aware of what I cannot control, the more I'm aware of what it is that I cannot change, the more I become myself, because I don't fool myself into being something or being able to do something that I cannot, nor is it in my remit to do. And in that we find humility. It is a life's work. And I simply share my own meditation with you, as I've been asked to, in this space. And I very much thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you. It's my great honor always to share with this beautiful congregation, and to be able to share with your amazing rabbi, a man that I greatly respect and admire, in his humility and in his dedication and in his awareness of his capacities and his strengths. And Yehi Ratzon, may God grant him continued wisdom to be able to exert all of his strength in the greatest way for his community. And may God bless this beautiful congregation in great strengths and strides, being able to respond to what we need to respond to build what we have in our capacity to build, and to be able to know the difference and be able to give it to God when it is that we need to. And that's very much at the heart of this congregation, isn't it? So with that, I thank you and bid you good night. Rav, if you would like to open the floor for questions, I'm okay to do that, but I don't know if that's what you want.
I know you have a shiur in about 10 minutes, I think.
So I don't have that shiur, but I do have.
Okay.
I only have about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, but they've got a quiz going on at Lauderdale Road, so
okay.
I'm not giving shiur tonight.
Okay. Any questions?
If there are, not expected or required.
No. Okay. No.
Lot to digest.
But obviously we won't be digesting much on Shiva Sabbath Tammuz.
Not physically anyway. Yeah.
Certainly on the spiritual sense. Thank you so
much. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu turn those days from sadness to happiness for all of us.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. We always enjoy hearing you, and you inspire us. And really, Bezrat Hashem, we should be able to hear you in the temple, the rebuilt temple, speak in our days. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Wish everyone well, healthy, and strong. Please, God.
Amen. I'm going to mute everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.